We'll give it a few more minutes or one more minute.
Sounds good.
All right, we can get started now. Anna, would you please turn off the music and mute yourself? All right, awesome. We have a great representation in the audience from all over. Nice to meet you all. Welcome to our webinar with Parsable and UL Solutions. We'll talk about how to engage frontline workers in ESG initiatives and improve traceability. I'm your host, Yasmin Zarabi. I'm head of ESG and general counsel at Parsable. And I'm joined by two subject matter experts that I'm honored to be with on this webinar. Khoi Do, who manages market development and innovation and Jaime Urquidi, who is Parsible's head of CPG and former customer of Parsable. So with that, can you each please introduce yourselves and provide a little bit about your bio, starting with Coy?
Sure. And first, let me thank Parsable and you, Yasmin, for setting up this webinar. I really appreciate being part of this. My name is Coy Do. I've been with UL for over 14 years now in a number of different capacities, but most recently in my newest role, focused on innovation and bringing new solutions, whether they be advisory or software, to market, and working within the ecosystem with partners like Parsable to support customer needs in the ESG space.
Thank you very much, Coy. And I am Jaime Urquidi. I have been working in Parsable for the last 4 years. And as Yasmin said, I used to be a customer. So I was one of the first, I was actually the first CPG customer for the company, like probably 6-7 years ago. And I bought Parsable to really transform the way that we operate in Unilever. I was the head of a manufacturing complex in Mexico City, and we implemented Parsable all across our margarine, ice cream, and mayonnaise plants. So from there, the rest is history. And I spent most of my career, over 20-some years, working in all the different supply chain roles in companies like P&G, Coca-Cola, M&M Mars, Unilever, Walmart, and now I'm here. So I'm glad to be here with you and share a little bit of our thoughts and how we see our partnership work in maximizing the way you connect your shop floor to the top floor.
Awesome, thank you. And joining us from Mexico today, so very exciting. Jaime, can you just tell us a little bit about who Parsable is and what we do?
Yeah, so thanks, Jasmine. So basically, I mean, what we do in Parsable is that we are unlocking the insights of industrial leaders so that they can improve their operations and build a more sustainable future. How we do that is that we're empowering the frontline workers that work either in a factory or on the front line on the shop floor, that they don't necessarily have a desk or a computer, right? And through a mobile app, we help them capture the data that today they hold in different systems that are disaggregated, and we'll go through it through the conference, and then put that together so that we can help everybody in the organization to make the best decisions possible. So it's not only to give visibility to top management, but also to the operators so that they can track how they're performing, and then they can influence the way that they're working and that they're achieving their own personal goals.
Awesome, thank you. And Coy, can you talk about UL Solutions?
Sure. So UL, I think most people know us from our 120 plus year history for the testing and certification and standards development around products in the marketplace. Over that time, our mission has evolved. And so at its core, it's providing healthy, safe, and sustainable living and working environments around the world. And so as that has continued to evolve, it goes beyond products, and it starts looking at management systems, the health and safety of workers within the workplace, and then even moving away from, the fire, shock, and hazard and acute safety hazards, and looking at long-term health and sustainability issues. And so that's why we are focused on advisory and advisory and software that's addressing those spaces. As we've continued to build that out, and we look at the ESG space, we see 4 key areas that UL supports our customers. And so one aspect of that is enterprise, and really driving the visibility and the data capture of major enterprise initiatives and reporting as it relates to carbon or reporting to sustainability frameworks like Carbon Disclosure Project. In other areas, we also look at the assets that are part of the operation. So you're building where you get your power, renewable energy sources, water usage, et cetera. Product, as I had mentioned earlier, but going deeper into chemicals and sustainability. And that also now provides visibility into the supply chain and working on chemical frameworks, components, materials, what have you, so that we understand where you're getting products from, or where you're getting your components from, and who you're getting it from.
Thank you. So let's talk about what we're going to cover during this webinar. We're going to talk about the gap between corporate ESG goals and the frontline operations and provide a strategy as to how to close that gap with multiple elements that are required. And then Jaime and Coy are going to put those strategies into actual case studies and demonstrate for you how customers that we've both worked with our entities and how they've been successful at implementing those strategies and technology and seen actual real results, which is what we're all here for. And then last, we'll talk about takeaways, and hopefully there's time to answer any questions that you may have. However, if we don't have the time, you can connect with all three of us on LinkedIn, and we'll happy to carry this conversation forward on one-on-one basis. So what do we mean with regards to this corporate, the ESG gap between corporate initiatives and the front lines? During the past 2 years, I've had the honor to virtually go on a tour and also in person and speak with many people in the manufacturing and industry 4.0 executives, shop floor managers, operational managers, digitization managers, and even frontline workers. And what I walked away with consistently is that the corporate ESG initiatives, no matter where they are in their maturity within the company, have been set by C-suite executives, you know, the SVP of sustainability or wherever else those decisions are made. And oftentimes those strategies, those requirements, those goals are set without any visibility, any knowledge as to how they're actually operationalized and materialized on the shop floor, on the plant floor, on the oil rigs. Those individuals are far removed from the actual front lines of people who are operating, conducting the standard operating practices, producing the goods that us as consumers enjoy on a daily basis. And so not only there is a knowledge gap with regards to what are the best practices to deploy those strategies, but also there's a major data gap. There is a major gap with regards to traceability, information. And as Peter Drucker says, if you can't measure, if you don't have the data, how do you improve, right? You need that data. You need real-time data, you need accurate and reliable data, and you need to be able to analyze it and continuously improve it. And you also need to engage people who are actually performing the work with regards to that strategy and get information feedback back. And so how do you do that? How do you close that gap? You do it with what Coy and Jaime are going to talk about, with engagement, with regards to cultural changes, education, but also you do need technology. You need connected technology with your front lines in order to gather that data that is traceable, that is non-rewritable, and it's actual real-time information of what is happening with regards to your waste collection. I've spoken to companies who actually say they take the invoices of their waste collector vendors and partners, and they manually enter every site's invoice and try to roll up that information up to, you know, mid-level management, and then have one person as an analytics person to like combine that information and be able to gather information to roll it up to corporate. And that's just such not only an efficient manner to do so, but there's no way of actually being able to validate and confirm that those invoices from the waste collectors are actually truthful and accurate. So, you know, you can actually deploy technology in order to gather that information, to validate that information, and be able to roll it up on much quicker and more efficient way, and be able to analyze it and then continuously improve the practices of waste collection, energy reduction, water consumption, safety practices, standardize those practices across the globe with every single site, and then also be able to ensure that audit your policies and ensure that you're being compliant and ready to go in the event that a tragic event happens, a spill happens, an accident happens, fatality happens, that you can actually gather that information, the report, and be able to analyze it. And again, the most important thing is to correct the mistakes quickly and efficiently and across multiple sites on a real-time basis. So that's what we're going to talk about, is that how do you close that corporate gap with your front lines? And with that, Koi, I invite you to talk about, how do you integrate that ESG strategy, and how do you change your corporate culture down to the front lines?
Yeah, and thank you, Yasmin. I think a lot of what you talked about, obviously a number of factors play a role, in its essence, we're talking about successful corporate programs or strategic initiatives and how those are rolled out. So you see on the right, there's a number of different models. I'm sure anybody who's picked up the books or some of the business cases, or even worked with some of the consultants in the space. There's a myriad of factors that play a role in it, and you see, in addition to that, you're looking for permanence. And so in some cases, you want to also build in aspects of continuous improvement, right? Or continuing evolution around this. And so the big question is, how do you integrate ESG performance into the culture? Or how do you even establish a culture that values performance on ESG criteria? And I think another piece of it too is understanding that a lot of the organizations that some of us work for are global in nature, thousands of employees in some cases. How do you engage employees across the board so that they understand how they contribute to some of these initiatives and why it's important to have them be part of it? I think, you touched on a really good part, Yasmin, is that a lot of these issues, they barely get off the ground, or a lot of these initiatives barely get off the ground because it is in addition to a person's day-to-day. And so if they feel like, they have to go out of their way to do something, they feel like they're not enabled to do it, they don't have the right systems or technology, it takes them, multiple minutes or hiccups to be able to enter in data, they're just not going to bother with it. And I think that really drives to the last pieces. We call them WIFMs in some cases, just kind of a catchy way of saying what's in it for me. And I think in all cases, when we're talking about engagement of frontline workers, strategy at the end of the day might make a lot of sense. It could be completely rational with all of the background and data behind it, all the trend analysis. And if that's not understood or readily understood by the people who are going to be operating within that system, it very quickly falls apart. And so thinking about what's in it for me across all levels of an organization really helps. In this myriad of different operating models that you see on the right, I think you see a couple of them where they really put culture at the center of it. But that's, it takes a lot to get to that culture, and a lot of factors play a role into it.
Yeah, one another Peter Drucker statement that you and I talked about is company culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So if you don't empower your people and include them as part of the ESG culture, then that strategy is not going to work.
And to that point, I mean, any of those initiatives that they're not being used or executed because of the WIFM factor that Koi was talking about, then I mean they're just going to die. They're not going to put any traction. So I mean, companies invest a lot of money in these type of strategy, in these type of initiatives to make it happen. But then we need to help the organization to really bring that to life. So these type of tools, technologies, and these ecosystems working together are the ones that make it readily to live and be executed. So.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So we want to take a poll just to see where everyone is with regards to their thoughts of what's the most important element of a successful corporate ESG initiative? Is it strategy? Is it governance? Is it culture or technology? So far, everyone's saying strategy. Let's see. Culture, yes. Governance, technology, culture is winning. I'll end the polls shortly. Culture is winning. All right, that's great. Culture came in 56%, and sounds like everyone agrees with us. All right.
Or at least they know what answer we're looking for, right? So that's good.
Yeah, there we go. Okay,
So far, so good.
I'll stop sharing and we'll move forward. All right, Coy.
So, I think obviously a lot of people picked culture, and there are multiple elements to culture. One of the frameworks that we use regularly within UL and with our partners is around Lean Six Sigma, but also incorporating aspects of the Shingo Institute. And so the Shingo Institute basically takes Lean Six Sigma one step further and talks about how culture is built upon the daily work of everybody that's operating within your organization. And they really talk about standard work for leaders, where those top three things that you see there, enablement, empowerment, and alignment, they are key to being able to drive culture and results within an organization. And so a really sort of a simple way to think about enablement, empowerment, and alignment is thinking about your own health goals, right? And so suppose that you have a health goal, and we're all body positive here, but suppose you have a health goal where you want to lose 10 pounds, or you want to be able to run a 5K in a couple of months. And so number one is you set that alignment, that vision. You have a workout plan. You know what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. You know what your diet's going to be. And then from an empowerment standpoint, you think about, well, where am I going to get my groceries for my special diet? Where am I going to work out? Do I have the right shoes and equipment? And so then that really helps you. That's an enablement, and really thinking about all of the tools and systems necessary for you to be able to achieve this goal. And then empowerment is really, do you feel like you can get off the couch and go do it? Or do you have the access codes to the gym that you want to go work out at? And so between those three things, you should be able to achieve your goal if you have those three things. And I think that's a really easy way to sort of think about how we go about our daily work. I think in today's society and in today's corporate structure, there's so much going on. There's so much information and data insights and so many competing initiatives that I think Yasmin really hit the nail on the head. The data, the underlying data and the insights that we gather off of that is really key to driving our direction on any of these. And we need to be able to course correct and be very flexible about that as well. And so with that, as things are changing, and so people don't feel like we're constantly changing our true norths or switching prioritization, we need to be able to transparently communicate not only the data, but our direction and vision along with that. So I see those two areas around data and communication as underpinning to those systems that we set up for successful results and drive of these programmatic initiatives.
Yeah, and Coy, you mentioned something that is super relevant, right? I mean, in my experience, I've interacted with different methodologies, Six Sigma, Lean, WCM, TPM, all of those, right? And it's all about how you create that culture, that environment, that learning environment within your operations at all the different levels of the organization, right? I mean, I've always thought that the moment of truth is when the person is putting the product inside the package and they do it with the right time, with the right cost, with the right quality, with the right safety, right? So in order to make that happen, everything around it needs to align and make sure that it goes there. And the companies that are more successful in doing this are companies that really enable that learning environment where everybody can make the best out of each other. So that is what we're trying to do with this, with all this process. So for the data, so we're going to start from the bottoms up. So we build that pyramid, right? Because then, I mean, if you don't have the right execution, then nothing's going to happen up there, right? It's going to just, you won't have the foundations, and then the pyramid will fall. So what we do at Parsable is that we help you discover information that otherwise you wouldn't be able to discover. typically, I mean, a lot of the operational records and procedures and routines are either captured in paper or in, in different forms that are not interconnected, right? And then you have a lot of information that is hidden. So, and paper has been a great solution, right? It was invented by the Egyptians and it has brought like all the different history to the day of today, right? But nowadays we have technology that can take it to the next level. So every time that you put a data point in paper, the data point dies. And you need to invest a lot of time, energy, effort to make sure that you can bring it up and then help people consume it. What we do in Parsable is that typically you have some like these black boxes on data or data gaps where for instance, this is a maintenance job where you know where the job starts and where the job ends in a typical software or in a typical recording point. What we do in Parsable is that as you're executing the work, you're tracking these little points, and then you can identify communication gaps, you can find training gaps, you can find other inefficiencies that help first the operators to know how they're doing against their standards, but also as they go up to the supervisors or managers or VPs and all that, you can start looking at different gaps, different bottlenecks that help you change those systems that enable people to do the right thing every time more consistently. Okay. And then this is, I just want to take this to an example. So then, I mean, this is one of our customers, one of our largest customers, where they were able to deploy a safety incident investigation process and program, okay, and safety observations. And they did it in a record time of like in 8 weeks, they were able to deploy this system in 8 languages, and then they would have real-time visibility on what was going on in the different countries that they implemented it. So this is how technology can be a catalyzer to really make these things happen. This can happen in paper, of course, but then, I mean, I don't know if it only happened to me in my 20 years of experience, but these types of programs take you years to be implemented, right? And this is just an example on how a customer that had the right culture, the right mindset, and then leverage technology to make it happen in a record time. And then once you have the data, the next part of it, the next building block is communication, right? So how do you communicate to the different levels of the organization, and how you make sure that it starts, generating that culture and fostering that empowerment of all the levels of the organization. So also Grupo Bimbo, what they're doing is that together with us, we have a very strong communication campaign where we have the leaders of the organization empowering the different levels of the team so that they can embrace the technology and solve for any problem that they have, right? So we have safety programs with them, but we also have very simple programs that a person that, for instance, I'm going to give you an example. In one of the plants, the capturing of the records of the people that went to the canteen and had lunch, it was done in paper. And the administrator of that process, which was very simple, or it was very basic in a way, they understood Parsable, or they understood the technology that the company was giving them to enable them. And then they solved for it. And now they do it in Parsable, and they don't have to be doing like this correlation of all the different websites or all the different databases. And now they solved, it was a very big problem for one person in one small process, but really made a difference because culturally, the company was giving them the fertile ground so they can just leverage these things and then start making their work more efficient and hit those sustainability goals or those effectiveness goals.
Thank you, Jaime.
Yeah, I think just 2 points that I would make on that is just to add on to what Jaime said. I think transparent communication, both good and bad, is really helpful for all levels of the organization, just to know where you're at and to know that, come hell or high water, if we're going to hit this, then we need to actually perform. And so how is that actually happening? And being able to have an open dialogue about what that means at all levels. I think the second thing that's really important, and it kind of supports that, is you need the democratization of data, right? And so good, bad, or otherwise, being able to have visibility at that into the data at all levels is really important to continue that forward. One last piece that I think is key as well is I think the stat is you have to hear something 7 times before it sticks in your memory. And so, communication and subject matter expertise and that know-how is something that's really important. One of the great things that UL does is talking about safety and sustainability moments. And so before we start all of our meetings, we always start with a safety or sustainability moment, talking about relevant topics that help people understand that this is always going to remain a consistent part of our meetings because we talk about this. It's important to us. And then from there, we have a whole library of them. We share them externally. And that's how we start all of our meetings so that people realize that safety and sustainability will continue to be major aspects of our business going forward. So now we go on to the next piece, and that's alignment, right? And so we have that communication and the practice of communication and the practice of sharing data. I think those are fundamental to that. And that really sets, to Jaime's point, the foundation for what good alignment looks like throughout the organization. And so, Yasmin, if we go to the next slide, I think a really good use case for somebody that we worked with before is Volvo. And so if you look at Volvo, they made a conscious decision to be more transparent about their ESG performance, particularly in the context of the automotive industry and where they're going. Some of you may even remember a few years back that Volvo was actually called to the carpet by some of their investors. And so they are making a choice to really address that performance. And so what you see here is in scope 1 and 2, for those who are potentially unfamiliar with the various scopes of greenhouse gas emissions, there's scope 1 and 2 that really cover your own operations. Scope 3 cover the value chain upstream with your suppliers and the downstream usage of your products in the marketplace. And so Volvo is not only driving alignment within their own operations, but driving alignment with their suppliers, and then downstream the usage of their machinery with their customers so that they can address their scope 3 emissions. And if you drive to the next slide, this has resulted in about an annual cost savings of about $102 million per year, just looking at circular economic like recycling, reuse, and everything practices within their supply chain, And in addition, they've set science-based targets. So they have a vision out there. There's a science-based target that they're aligning to, and then they're showing their progress along the way. Not only, again, for their own operations, but with their suppliers and downstream users. And so this is a really good case study around how alignment really helps achievement of goals, not only with your team, but external. I think another topic for another time is really thinking about, it's hard enough to control your own operations. How am I supposed to work on, the suppliers that aren't part of my footprint or don't report to me? Or downstream customers, I have no idea how they're going to use it. But I think that there's a number of things that we're seeing from an innovative ecosystem play where people are incentivizing different players in the marketplace, and also looking at how you leverage this ecosystem if everybody is trying to move towards this sustainability goal or ESG performance.
I think this is really powerful because oftentimes when we're talking about sustainability and ESG, we're talking about it's the right thing to do, right? We all want to save our planet. We all want to have a safer work environment for our workers and want to upscale and make sure that we are being good corporate citizens, right? Compliance. But what is missing from this conversation is that not only ESG is the right thing to do, it also tremendously helps the bottom line. And that ROI factor is always missing from the conversation, that it actually does help the shareholders of the company. It helps, the executives of the company. And this is, I think, why also many companies what I'm seeing is are moving towards tying the C-suite's compensation to those ESG goals and achievement, because again, not just the right thing to do, but economically it means a lot to that company and profits as well. So I'm glad that you all were able to quantify that success for Volvo. All right, we have another poll. And I just want to remind those that are live streaming on LinkedIn, sorry, they won't be able to participate. Sorry about that. So the next question is, has your organization set goals and targets for ESG performance? Yes, on track to hit. Yes, but haven't operationalized. No, but planning it. No, haven't considered at all. Hopefully we won't see too much in that area. And you can see this, right? Okay. All right, give it a few more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Well, so glad to hear that majority of people are on track to hit, and then followed by haven't operationalized but in the planning, and also those are in the planning stage. So hopefully today's webinar will help you incorporate the planning. And I think that's it. We are moving along. So empowerment. You have data, you've communicated the results of that data, you have alignment, and now it's time to empower the organization.
Yeah, so I think this is really the meat of the whole conversation today, right? We're looking at these key initiatives. They make business sense, as we talked about. And really part of it is just understanding how are you going to engage your workforce in these initiatives. And so one case study that we really like to talk about at UL is around the Sarah Cannon Cancer Institute. And it's a cancer research institute globally, and it's part of the HCA health network. It's one of the largest health networks within the United States. And so they really set about establishing a safety culture within their organization and identifying areas where they would be able to improve safety and then also their safety awareness. And so it started with just kind of looking at an audit, but then from there it started engaging their leadership, engaging their workers. And it had a number of immediate impacts: a 9% increase in people feeling safe at work, $163,000 decrease in worker claims over the course of our initial engagement. But I think the one that you want to talk about here is a 22% increase in voluntary reporting of incidents. And that includes both incidents and observations. So something that hasn't happened yet, but we think is a potential issue. And that's really key, because once you start to incorporate that and engage people, there's no stoppage of how many ways people could address issues that you see in the workplace. And so I think that's really important, because then you start to see that people are taking it seriously. They see the benefit of the what's in it for me, not only for them, but their coworkers, and kind of avoiding that. And then that allows you to co-create and drive continuous improvement, and and sometimes gamify it and drive friendly competition around who's the safest facility or how we're approaching this. And then people take a level of pride and ownership in this whole thing. So that's a really, really great case on the environmental health and safety side. If we can go to the next slide. From an EHS perspective, that one's a little bit easier to see the impact. Acute safety issues, nobody wants to see anybody hurt or injured in the workplace. And so people feel that need and that sense of urgency on the safety side. From a sustainability perspective, or sometimes with other topics within ESG performance, it's a little bit harder to see the direct impact. Some of that is downstream, it's unseen, it's energy usage. And so it's harder or more indirect to see how you directly contribute. But I think when we talk about co-creation and enabling and empowering your workforce, Project Drawdown is a really good example of how you can start to arm your people with the right tools and thought process around it. So Project Drawdown started as a book. It's basically looking at how you can address climate change through a number of different areas. And so they think about energy usage, they think about carbon sinks to combat carbon, and then also looking at how they drive equity globally. And so within those three pillars, Project Drawdown has now turned into a not-for-profit organization, and they provide solutions and template solutions. They provide capacity building and training. And then these are just easy ways for people to say, look, we've started here, we're seeing the impact. Maybe there's some other things that we could do. Here's a good resource for us to learn more about this. And then we can actually put those into action within our own workforce. And that co-creation really, again, starts to drive a whole new group of engaged workers that are willing to contribute to the overall success of some of these initiatives.
Thank you for that, Coy. And then last but not least is enablement, right? How do you enable everything that we talked about? And like Coy said, if you're trying to lose weight, do you have all the tools that you need in order to do that? So with that, we're going to talk about the IBM Institute for Business report.
Yeah, and this was one that we came across as we were doing some research for this webinar, and just something that we talk about regularly. Obviously, between our two organizations, there's a number of software or technology-enabled solutions that we feel help support these efforts. But this was a really good study if you're talking about this within your organizations, thinking about how people are leveraging sustainability as a transformation catalyst. So they basically have categorized organizations and people who are leading these initiatives into 4 sort of archetypes. And the trailblazer, the business leaders, they have found ways of not only pushing sustainability, but leveraging sustainability or ESG performance as a catalyst for business transformation. And so how is this helping us achieve other goals in addition to us also having the additional benefit of our ESG performance? I think, as Yasmin mentioned earlier, and something that we're seeing is that there is superior business impact, and investors and the market are taking notice of that. Downstream buyers and OEMs are also seeing that from their suppliers, is that if I can manage this and I can manage out the waste or the injuries or deviations from brand, then I have a really good opportunity to be able to provide consistently and resiliently how I'm providing that to my downstream buyers. I think one of the other things that they talk about is also not doing this in a vacuum, right? So as we talked about, there are a number of resources, partners, people within your supply chain, your own employees who are co-creating with you. So not doing this in a vacuum and just trying to push it through. And then I think the last thing is understanding what technologies are out there, and also having this be coupled with innovation. And so there are a number of innovations out there. And even then, I thought that the right graphic was really important. So you talk about edge computing, you talk about AI, and all the different ways that you could apply technology to ESG performance. And the number one technology that they felt was still really important was mobility. And why do they feel like mobility is important? Is because they feel that that is a really key way to enable their workforce to be able to engage the data, collect the data, and be part of this this effort. And so all of those will play a role on down the line, but that mobility piece, especially where a lot of organizations are at in their sustainability journey, is really important to kind of get the ball rolling.
All right. Jaime, you're going to talk about the digital maturity curve.
And just connecting to what Coy was talking about, I mean, we live in a mobile environment, or in a mobile culture, right? So I think that connects very well on this graph. This is how we see the evolution of how the shop floor is moving into that digital maturity curve, right? And you might find your organizations in different levels of these building blocks, but something that is very important from our perspective is that these are building blocks that will help you have a strong foundation and a strong evolution. Because I mean, if you have advanced or edge computing in some of your processes, but you don't have a good data set where you're getting the information from that is consistent, then the output of that process will not be good, right? So that's why we look at this as a walk, crawl, walk, run race, right? Or an evolution, because first you have, we talked about paper-based or delayed responses, or disaggregated systems, right? So we go to the first step and we start digitizing and start connecting into those interactions between everything that happens in a standard operating procedure, right? I mean, if we look at a production process, what happens is that you have an interaction between safety, environment, quality, productivity, maintenance, efficiency, effectiveness, and all those different concepts need to happen at the same time so you can have the right product at the right time with the right process, with the right safety, and with the right quality, right? So as you have these digital procedures or these digital tools working together from machines, from people, from systems, from the process execution, and you put them together, then you start building that. And once you have that information ready, then you can start connecting your workers to other workers and then start leveraging that scale that gives you this, data aggregation. And once you have that, then you can go to that nirvana, right? Where you have, the process conditions together with the ingredient characteristics, and then with the environment and everything coming together, so that you can influence the way that work is being done, the settings, the right procedures, and all those things that need to happen at that right moment, so that you can improve your efficiency and have that consistency, right? So it's everything needs to be, you need to have that vision, and we always have that vision, but you need to just start building it and making sure that you have strong foundations, because otherwise you're going to start falling and then just not having efficient outputs out of that.
I think one thing just to reiterate about mobility and this digital maturity curve is that, twofold. One is what we found is that older generation of workers are feeling empowered, and their skill sets are upscaling and giving them a reason not to want to retire, because they're learning new tools and feeling more productive at work. And then the second, I think, benefit to bringing mobility and technology into manufacturing is that, as those generation of older workers are retiring, as we have this mass resignation and need to hire and engage new generations, Gen Zs and millennials, they don't want to work for companies that do not use the regular tools that they use in their daily lives, right? I have 2 teenage kids that are hooked to their mobile phone all day long, and they want to work for a company that will enable them to use what they use all day long for their work. So super important to, realize that paper-based processes are just not going to continue to transform, their current workers, and then invite and engage new generations to that line of work.
Yeah.
One thing I want to just add to that is, maybe a cross section of that curve that gets talked about a little bit less is the adaptability and resiliency of the systems that you set up, right? And so there is an aspect where I'm sure a lot of people on this call have been through it. Is you spend months or even years trying to implement some software solution. You get it in there, and by the time that you've done that, your business imperatives have changed, your business culture, the modern day workforce has changed, right? I think COVID is a great example of that for everybody. And so then how are your systems going to be adaptable, or what tools do you have in your tool belt to be able to continue to drive the solutions that you're looking for in that ever evolving workspace? And so that is something to think about as you're going through and thinking about what's the ecosystem, how adaptive are the tools that I'm using, and then how am I going to be able to deploy that and represent that deployment as transparently as possible with the people who are involved with it.
Okay, awesome. Jaime, drive it home.
So I mean, in a nutshell or in summary, so you have your corporate initiatives on the left, right? Where you have your vision, your alignment, your commitments. We want to all of our organizations want to make the world a better place, and we want to make it sustainable, because sustainability is not only for the planet, but for having a sustainable company. I mean, if UL wasn't like focused on that sustainable mindset on their business, they wouldn't have like that 120 years old in the market, right? So we're starting, and we want to be here for that. We're going to follow you for that 120 years old or 20 years in the market. But it's just that corporate vision, that corporate initiatives, okay, how they become to life. And then on the frontline workers, how we enable and how we provide the right tools, the right learning environment, the right flexibility, and the right empowerment to the people to really do the best of their work and make those two ends meet, and then generate that sweet spot that connects the top line or the top floor to what is happening on the factors or on the real execution, and then we can really influence the way that we are actually achieving those goals, right? So this interaction between the top floor initiatives that drive that vision and then the execution, that is what's happening today, are the ones that really unlock that value and make it, much bigger, much relevant, and more effective, and making sure that you really are going to be achieving your goals.
Thank you so much for that, Jaime and Coy. I learned a lot from the two of you. This has been a great webinar. We are over time, so sorry that we couldn't get to your questions, but please connect with us on LinkedIn, and we can speak to you individually about anything that you want to talk about, or as a group. So thank you everyone for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.